Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So as you saw from last week's video, I reconnected with nature. For 3 days last week, I camped out in the Thompson Okanagan, and I mentioned it in my Instagram post that I didn't realize how much I actually needed that trip. So in today's video, I wanted to share with you some of the lessons that I learned on that trip. Getting back to morning photography. If you asked me a year ago if I was a sunrise or a sunset person, I would have 100% told you sunset because I'm not an early morning person. I don't like waking up early, but about 3 or 4 months ago at the beginning of spring, I was trying to get into this habit of doing at least one morning session a week. And I mentioned it in the video that I kind of just lost momentum at the beginning of June when I went into isolation and I just wasn't able to get back into like the groove of things. But on this trip, I actually woke up at 6 a.m. every single day to do morning photography, and it was amazing. It was peaceful, it was serene. It was such a huge reminder of how awesome morning photography is. So I really want to get back into doing morning photography. Doing more nature photography. So due to the nature and the direction that I took with my seasonal project, I'm more in the city, I'm more where people are at. So I'm not doing a ton of nature type photography, but this past trip has really got me thinking of getting back to doing more nature photography, especially in the morning, because the best way that I can describe just how it makes me feel is at peace. Going back to a simple setup. So after my one lens challenge ended in June, I've gone back to using my full gear. So on this trip, I brought my camera backpack and my full gear with me. And I just found myself, and I even mentioned it to my mom, that I missed the simplicity, the minimalism of what I was experiencing in June with the one lens challenge. But I really think a big problem of mine is actually my bag. And it might seem silly, but the only bag I have where I can carry my water bottle is actually my camera backpack. And you might be wondering if I even need to bring a water bottle when I go out, but the answer is kind of yes and no. In the autumn and winter, of course, likely not, because if anything, I'll gravitate towards actually having a hot beverage, but it's summer. And it hovers around 35 degrees on the daily. It was 42 during the heat wave. It's hot, and I need a water bottle because I've gone out without one. And I find myself so thirsty by the time I get back to the vehicle. It's a much less enjoyable experience, and I oftentimes develop a headache, of course, if I don't drink enough water. So, of course, having a camera backpack just seems silly if I'm going simple and I only have one camera body and lens and a water bottle, so I stuff it with everything under the sun. So on this trip, I was really only using one lens on this trip, but of course, I needed something to carry my phone, my wallet, some extra batteries, some extra SD cards, so I brought my camera backpack out with me with all of its gear, and it just was super unnecessary. So I want to go back to using a simple setup. Doing a one lens challenge with all of my lenses. So if you haven't watched my 25mm one lens challenge video, I'll leave a card and a link in the description, but I really enjoyed it and its benefits. You really learn how to use that lens. So I want to start in September doing a one lens challenge with all of my lenses, and I'm thinking for September I'll start with the 7 to 14mm because it's my least used lens, and then I'll kind of go from there. Robynne once suggested in one of his videos that you do a one lens challenge for an entire year. I don't know if I'm quite there yet. I mean, I guess I did use the 12 to 40mm for an entire year before I got any additional lenses. But until then, I think I'll just stick to doing kind of monthly challenges with the one lens. And I really encourage that if you've never done a one lens challenge, to give it a try. And if you have already done one with one of your lenses, give it a go with all of your other lenses with me. Honing in again on intimate landscape photography. Now, I've done a video on this before, so I'll leave a card and a link in the description, but I even find in the current project that I'm working on that I've been gravitating towards finding intimate scenes. And then when I was at the lake doing photography, I again found myself loving and gravitating towards the intimate, minimalistic, sort of scaled, large use of negative space photographs than others that I was taking. Room to think and breathe. So while I was camping for those few days, I was doing a little bit of work. I was filming last week's video, and then I was also working on the newsletter that's going to be released at the end of this week. But I was really spending majority of my time, photographing in the morning, spending time with family, getting out on the paddleboard, just really enjoying camping and summer. And honestly, this mini break gave me room to think, it gave me room to breathe and to reflect on what's important and get ideas, which I find is hard to do at home because let's face it, we're adults, we have bills to pay, we have, the house or the apartment to clean, we have other commitments and responsibilities and things to do. So I really want to implement a practice of taking this like mini break more regularly because I think there's benefits there that need exploring. And lastly, I want to touch on how I was working with the smoky condition. So it was quite smoky while I was out there. You can tell in the photos. There was a couple afternoons where it was kind of lightening up when it comes to the smoky conditions, and there's one afternoon where it completely cleared up. But for the majority of the trip, it was quite smoky. And this is something to consider if you are planning a trip to the Okanagan in the summer. I do live in particularly the interior of BC, and we do get fires. I find in most summers the smoke doesn't come until the end of July, August, but this year it seemed to come a little bit earlier and stay longer, at the beginning of July, and now we're at the end of July and it's still, majority days it's smoky outside. But from a photography perspective, I honestly didn't mind. I really found that the atmosphere created layers to the environment. It made me focus more on like lines and shapes. And then in many cases, I was actually using sort of the atmospheric conditions to create a blank canvas in the photos. So those are just some of the ways that I was working with the atmospheric conditions instead of against it. So that is everything for today's video. Leave me a comment down below if you've been out camping so far and if there's any lessons that you've learned from your trip. I really hope you enjoyed today's video and you found it useful, and that the lessons I learned from this trip really inspires you to get out in nature and go camping. If it did, hit that like button and subscribe, maybe buy me a cup of coffee, and I'll see you in the next one.